My name is Victoria, and I'm 32 years old. Today, I live a peaceful life with my 10-year-old son Leo, but the journey that brought us here was anything but peaceful. I was born into a family where love was not evenly distributed. My mother, Madison, always favored my younger sister, Vanessa. From the very beginning, it was clear that Vanessa was the daughter who could do no wrong, the golden child, the one who deserved all the praise and affection. I, on the other hand, was the shadow, the daughter who was too quiet, too ordinary, too easy to overlook. The only person who truly loved me for who I was, who made me feel seen, was my father. He would always pull me aside after Madison's cold comments, kneel down, and tell me, "You're the heart of this family, Victoria. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." He was my safe place, my anchor. But life has a cruel way of taking away the ones we can least afford to lose. When I was just 21, my father suffered a sudden heart attack. His death shattered me in ways words could never explain and left me defenseless against Madison's coldness and favoritism. After my father's funeral, it was as if Madison no longer needed to pretend I existed. Vanessa became her sole focus, the shining star, while I became the invisible daughter, barely tolerated within the walls I once called home. Still, I pushed forward. I buried myself in my studies, earned a degree in accounting, and tried to build a future where I didn't have to rely on anyone else. I didn't have dreams of grand success, just simple hopes for a peaceful life, where kindness mattered more than appearances. Then, when I least expected it, I met Thomas. Thomas wasn't flashy or rich. He was a hardworking construction worker with a crooked smile and warm brown eyes. We met at a friend's casual backyard barbecue, both of us a little out of place, a little shy, and we clicked instantly. He liked that I wasn't loud and showy like others. I liked that he listened, really listened. Our relationship moved quickly, but it never felt rushed. It felt right. Despite Madison's clear disapproval and Vanessa's endless mockery, Thomas and I got married in a small courthouse ceremony surrounded by a few supportive friends. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to someone who chose me, not for appearances, not for status, but for my heart. Little did I know, life still had more battles waiting for me. Thomas and I didn't have much, but what we had was real. Our small one-bedroom apartment had creaky floors and peeling paint, but it was filled with laughter, late-night conversations, and simple dreams. For the first time, I lived in a home where love didn't have to be earned, it was given freely. Less than a year after our wedding, we received the news that changed everything. I was pregnant. I still remember holding that tiny test in my hand, staring at the plus sign with tears streaming down my face. I wasn't crying out of fear. For the first time in my life, I was crying because of hope. When I told Thomas, he lifted me off the ground, spinning me in circles while laughing and shouting, "We're going to be a family, Vic. A real family." Those months were filled with planning, saving, and preparing. Thomas picked up extra shifts at the construction site. I took on freelance accounting work from home. We scrimped and saved, excited to build a future for the child we already loved more than anything. Thomas built a crib by hand, painting it soft blue. He read baby books aloud at night, his deep voice filling the room with silly stories. We argued over baby names, not seriously, but the kind of arguments where laughter outweighs words. 9 months later, after a long, painful labor, Leo was born. My son. My miracle. He had Thomas's warm brown hair and my wide blue eyes. From the first moment I held him, something inside me healed, like all the invisible wounds of my past had found their balm. Thomas cried openly when he held Leo for the first time. "You made something perfect," he whispered, kissing my forehead. For 6 beautiful months, our little family thrived. I would wake up to Thomas singing Leo to sleep after early morning feedings, his rough construction-hardened hands somehow impossibly gentle with our son. The apartment may have been small, but it overflowed with love. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, everything unraveled. It was a rainy Tuesday when Thomas didn't come home. At first, I thought maybe he had stayed late to pick up more hours. But when I saw 2 construction managers standing outside my door, hats in hand, faces pale. I knew. The scaffolding had collapsed. Thomas had fallen from the third floor. He had died on impact. The grief was suffocating. It swallowed everything. The laughter, the hope, even the light from the windows seemed to dim. I went through the motions of the funeral, barely aware of anything but the crushing weight of loss. I held Leo tighter every night, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. It wasn't just my heart that broke that day. It was my future. Returning to Madison's house wasn't a choice. It was survival. After Thomas's death, the small savings we had scraped together vanished within months. Rent, bills, formula for Leo, doctor visits. I tried picking up extra freelance work, but grief clouded my mind. I couldn't keep up. There was nowhere else to go. So one gray afternoon, carrying a 6-month-old Leo bundled tightly in my arms, I knocked on the front door of the house I had once called home. Madison answered with a tight frown, her eyes raking over me and then down at Leo, as if already calculating the burden we would be. Without a word, she stepped aside and let us in. The coldness inside the house hadn't changed. Neither had Madison. And neither, it seemed, had Vanessa, who flitted around the house with an air of superiority, already living like she deserved a castle. They both treated Leo like an unwanted guest, an inconvenience. Still, I told myself it was temporary, just until I could find my footing again. I worked late nights, accepting any remote accounting jobs I could manage, and I cared for Leo with everything I had left. I ignored Madison's biting remarks. I tuned out Vanessa's smirks. Time slipped by in a quiet, exhausting blur. Year after year, I stayed at Madison's house, quietly raising Leo, saving every dollar I could. Leo grew from a giggling toddler into a bright, kind-hearted boy who loved books and soccer. Now, after all these years, Leo was 10 years old, smart, brave, and the greatest joy of my life. Though we still lived under Madison's roof, emotionally, we had built our own tiny fortress of hope and love inside those cold walls. I kept telling myself, just a little longer. We're almost free. And then, one evening as we sat at the dinner table, Madison dropped the news casually, as if she were mentioning the weather. Vanessa's wedding is next month. Huge wedding. Big names. Everyone important will be there. You and your son are expected to attend. But make sure you don't embarrass us. I blinked, stunned for a moment. Leo looked up at me, confusion in his young eyes. I nodded slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. Of course, I said quietly. Inside, my heart twisted painfully. I knew this invitation wasn't about love or even family. It was about appearances. We were nothing but background props in Vanessa's carefully curated world. Still, I decided we would go. Not for Madison. Not for Vanessa. For Leo. Because he deserved at least one day where he could believe he belonged. The morning of Vanessa's wedding felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I stood in front of my small mirror, smoothing the simple navy blue dress I had bought secondhand. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean and dignified, a reflection of the respect I still fought to hold on to, even when the world tried to strip it away. Leo, now 10 years old and growing taller every day, stepped into the room in his little gray suit and blue tie. He beamed up at me, his hair neatly combed, his shoes polished. "Mom, do I look good?" he asked, smiling wide enough to melt my heart. "You look perfect," I said, bending down to kiss his forehead. I told myself, no matter what happened today, Leo would feel proud. He would know he was loved. We arrived at the sprawling garden venue where the wedding was being held, a place overflowing with expensive decorations, gold-trimmed tables, and towering floral arrangements. Immediately, I felt the weight of eyes on us. Madison met us at the entrance, offering a cold, tight-lipped smile. "You're here," she said, scanning me from head to toe. "Just try not to cause any scenes." Before I could respond, Vanessa floated toward us, dazzling in her designer wedding gown, her makeup perfect, her hair cascading in artful waves. "Victoria," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, her voice sickly sweet, "so good of you to make it." It wouldn't be a real family event without you. Lurking in the background. Soft laughter from a few guests rippled around us. Leo shifted closer to me, his hand brushing against mine. I gave him a quick, reassuring squeeze. Inside the grand hall, the opulence was overwhelming. Glittering chandeliers, champagne towers, a live quartet playing softly. But despite all the sparkle, the coldness was palpable. We were seated far from the main table, tucked in a corner near the kitchen doors. Far enough that no one would notice us, unless they needed someone to whisper about. I focused on Leo, helping him settle into his chair, forcing smiles, making jokes about the 2 fancy plates and the mountain of silverware. For his sake, I was willing to endure anything. But throughout the evening, I caught Vanessa and Madison whispering behind their hands, casting glances our way, smirking like schoolyard bullies plotting a cruel joke. There was tension in the air, an electricity I could feel buzzing under my skin. Something was coming, something ugly, and I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. Dinner had just been served when it happened. A shrill scream cut through the elegant music and chatter. My phone. It was Vanessa, standing near her table, her face twisted in outrage. My gold iPhone. The limited edition one. It's missing. A ripple of uneasy whispers swept through the guests. I instinctively reached for Leo's hand under the table. He looked up at me, confused and anxious. Vanessa's eyes darted across the room and landed squarely on Leo. You, she pointed dramatically, her voice rising. You were near our table earlier, weren't you? Leo's face turned pale. He shook his head quickly. I didn't take anything. Don't you dare lie. Madison snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. Gasps rose from nearby tables. Before I could react, Madison and Vanessa stormed toward us. Madison grabbed Leo roughly by the arm, yanking him from his chair. Leo whimpered, trying to pull away. Where is it? Madison barked. Where did you hide the phone, you little thief? I didn't. I swear. Leo cried, tears already pooling in his wide eyes. I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. Let him go, I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. But Madison didn't listen. Of course you're defending him, she sneered, releasing Leo with a shove. You probably taught him. Like mother, like son. I moved to shield Leo, pulling him behind me. But Madison wasn't done. In a fit of fury, she snatched a heavy decorative jar from a nearby table, a gold-painted, fragile-looking piece meant for display, and smashed it hard against the side of my head. Pain exploded across my skull. I stumbled sideways, the room spinning, catching the table edge before I collapsed. Blood trickled down the side of my face. The reception hall froze. Guests gasped, some standing up, some whispering in shock. Leo knelt beside me, sobbing. Mom, are you okay? I nodded weakly, my hand pressed against the bleeding wound. Vanessa stood above us, breathing hard, fake tears filling her eyes. You see what kind of people they are, she cried out dramatically. First theft, now violence. Madison crossed her arms, nodding with mock sadness, playing the victim perfectly. But not everyone was convinced. Across the room, a few guests exchanged suspicious glances. Someone pulled out their phone, not to take pictures of the wedding this time, but to make a call. I heard the urgent whisper, "Call the police. Right now." As I sat there, bleeding, holding my terrified son, I realized something deep and undeniable. This time, they had gone too far. And there would be no going back. The piercing sound of approaching sirens cut through the thick, stunned silence of the reception hall. Moments later, 2 police officers and a team of paramedics pushed through the grand entrance, their expressions grim and professional. The guests parted like water around them, creating a wide path straight to me. Sitting on the floor, blood trickling from the side of my head, clutching a sobbing Leo. "I'm Officer Miller," one of the officers said, kneeling beside me. "Ma'am, are you able to speak? Are you hurt badly?" I nodded, dizzy from the pain but determined to stay strong for Leo. The paramedics immediately began examining me, cleaning the wound and checking my vitals. You have a moderate cut on your temple, one said softly. You'll be okay. But you need rest. Leo stayed glued to my side, his little hands trembling. Meanwhile, Officer Miller turned sharply toward the rest of the hall. Who here can tell me exactly what happened? He demanded. Madison stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, crocodile tears, clutching Vanessa's arm tightly. It's all a misunderstanding, Madison wailed. My daughter's precious iPhone was stolen by that boy. She pointed dramatically at Leo. Officer Miller's face remained impassive. And you assaulted this woman over a missing phone? He asked coolly. It wasn't like that. Madison snapped. She attacked us first. We were just trying to defend ourselves. Officer Miller's partner spoke up, voice sharp. We're going to need to see the venue's security footage immediately. The flustered venue manager, desperate to avoid further scandal, rushed forward. We have cameras covering the entire reception area, he said quickly. I'll pull up the footage right now. As the manager disappeared toward the control room, the paramedics finished bandaging my head. They offered to transport me to the hospital, but I shook my head. I'm staying, I said firmly. I want to see this through. Officer Miller crouched beside Leo and offered him a bottle of water. You're very brave, he said gently. We're going to make sure the truth comes out. Leo nodded, his lower lip still trembling. Meanwhile, guests began whispering among themselves, murmurs growing louder as they realized the perfect facade Vanessa and Madison had built was cracking. In less than 10 minutes, the venue manager returned, clutching a remote. Officer Miller gestured for the footage to be played on the large monitor by the entrance. The room fell into a heavy, expectant silence. I squeezed Leo's hand. I didn't know what the cameras would show, but for the first time in my life, I believed the truth might finally have a voice louder than their lies. All eyes were glued to the large monitor as the footage began to play. At first, it showed the guests mingling, eating, laughing, just the typical joyful chaos of a wedding reception. Then the camera zoomed onto the gift table and nearby dining area, the place where Vanessa's limited edition gold iPhone had supposedly disappeared. Everyone watched in dead silence. And there it was, clear as day. Vanessa, in her glittering gown, slipped away from her bridal party while everyone was distracted. She glanced around quickly, then picked up her gold iPhone from her own table and slyly slid it deep into her clutch bag. There was no sign of Leo anywhere near her. Gasps of shock spread through the room. The footage continued. Moments later, Vanessa dramatically clutched her empty table, screaming about her missing phone. Madison rushed to her side, throwing furious glances toward our table without a second thought. The lies played out step by step on the giant screen, leaving no room for doubt. Officer Miller crossed his arms, his face like stone. He turned toward Madison and Vanessa, who now stood frozen, their faces pale, their mouths opening and closing without sound. You both staged this, Officer Miller said, voice cold. You planted a false accusation against a child, then escalated it into a violent assault. Madison stammered, It's not what it looks like. She forced us into it. Save it for the judge, Officer Miller said sharply. He signaled to his partner. Within seconds, Madison and Vanessa were placed under arrest. You are being charged with assault, false reporting, and endangerment of a minor, Officer Miller declared, his voice carrying across the hall. The guests erupted into a storm of whispers and murmurs. Phones were raised, recording every moment as Madison and Vanessa were handcuffed right there, in their designer dresses and perfect hair, now falling apart. Vanessa tried to plead with Jackson, who had been standing stiffly to the side this entire time, heartbreak etched across his face. Jackson, tell them this is crazy. It was just a misunderstanding. Jackson looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her, and the look in his eyes made it clear. There was no saving this. As Madison and Vanessa were led toward the exit, Madison hurled one final venomous glare at me. This is your fault, Victoria, she spat. But for the first time, her words felt powerless. I stood tall, despite the throbbing pain in my head and the tremble in my hands. I held Leo close. Because finally, after years of being invisible and voiceless, the truth had spoken for us. As the officers escorted Madison and Vanessa toward the entrance, the guests stood frozen, unsure whether to speak, move, or even breathe. The grand fairy tale wedding had transformed into a public disaster. And then, Jackson, the man who had once intended to make Vanessa his wife, stepped forward. His face was grim, his jaw clenched tightly as he faced the crowd. Vanessa, still handcuffed but desperately struggling to maintain dignity, tried to rush toward him. "Jackson, please," she sobbed. "This is all a mistake. We can fix it." He didn't flinch. He didn't reach for her. He didn't even soften. Instead, he picked up the microphone from the MC's stand, turned toward the guests, and spoke loud and clear. "I know many of you came here today expecting a celebration," Jackson said, his voice steady. "But today, I realized I was about to marry someone who would destroy an innocent child's life to protect her own image." The room went silent except for the soft gasps and the quiet click of someone recording with their phone. "I cannot and will not marry someone capable of such cruelty," he continued. "Therefore, I am officially canceling this wedding and ending our engagement." Vanessa let out a gut-wrenching wail. "No, no, you can't," she screamed, struggling against the officers. Jackson's gaze didn't falter. "This isn't just about today," he said, his voice growing heavier with emotion. "This is about a lifetime of lies, of deceit, of selfishness." He turned to look at me, his eyes locking onto mine, and in that moment, something shifted. It was as if he saw not just the humiliation I had endured today, but the years of rejection, betrayal, and silent suffering. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent promise of support. Madison screamed threats as she was pushed out the door, still trying to blame me for everything. Vanessa crumbled completely, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her wedding dress wrinkled and dragging. Neither of them looked powerful anymore. Neither of them looked untouchable. They looked exactly as they were, broken, selfish, and defeated. As the police cars pulled away, flashing red and blue lights across the cobblestone driveway, I stood with Leo beside me, feeling the cool evening air against my bruised skin. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel powerless. I felt free. And I knew this was only the beginning of taking back everything they had tried to steal from me. The morning after the wedding disaster, the sun rose on a different world. Leo slept soundly for the first time in what felt like weeks, and I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of cold coffee, thinking about everything that had happened. For once, fear didn't freeze me. For once, anger didn't drown me. I felt something sharper, stronger. Resolve. That afternoon, I met with Olivia, a sharp, fearless attorney who listened carefully as I explained everything, from the false theft accusation to the physical assault, to the emotional damage inflicted on my son. Jackson sat beside me during the entire meeting, silent but unwavering, his support a powerful force beside me. "You have a strong case," Olivia said, her tone confident. "Video evidence, eyewitnesses, medical reports. They don't stand a chance." Jackson leaned forward. "I'm willing to testify," he said firmly. "I saw everything." For a moment, emotions swelled in my throat. I nodded, grateful beyond words. We filed the lawsuit the very next morning. Charges of assault, false accusation against a minor, and emotional distress. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors, former family friends, even distant relatives heard about what had happened at Vanessa's ruined wedding. Sympathy that had once been reserved for Madison and Vanessa now shifted, finally, toward Leo and me. At the first court hearing, Madison and Vanessa appeared small, fragile, stripped of the arrogance they had once worn like armor. I sat in the courtroom, my hand wrapped around Leo's. He was brave, standing tall even when he had to recount what had been done to him. Olivia presented the evidence clearly and methodically. The CCTV footage, eyewitness accounts, my medical reports, character references from friends, neighbors, and Leo's teachers. Then Jackson took the stand. He testified about what he had seen that night, how Vanessa had manipulated events, how Madison had assaulted me without provocation, how they had endangered an innocent boy's emotional and physical safety. His words were steady and powerful, and they shattered whatever weak defense Madison's expensive lawyer had tried to build. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty, the judge declared. Both Madison and Vanessa were sentenced to several years in prison, with no possibility of early release, for their crimes against me and my son. Tears welled up in my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of victory. Leo hugged me tightly, whispering, "Mom, we won." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I finally believed it. After the court case ended, the world felt different. Freer. Lighter. For the first time in years, Leo and I could walk without fear of cold glances, cruel whispers, or hidden traps. We were finally free from Madison's cruelty, from Vanessa's jealousy, from a lifetime of being treated like less. One crisp autumn afternoon, about 6 months after the verdict, Jackson invited Leo and me to the beach. The sky stretched wide and blue above us, and the sound of the waves was soothing. We built sandcastles with Leo, laughing like children ourselves. As the sun began to set, painting the horizon in shades of gold and pink, Jackson turned to me, his expression soft but serious. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and knelt in the cool sand. "Victoria," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I fell in love with your kindness long before I even knew it. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. You're the mother every child deserves. You're the woman I want by my side for the rest of my life." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, a simple band with a single diamond, elegant and full of meaning. Leo, standing beside him, grinned so widely his cheeks flushed pink. "Say yes, Mom," he whispered, bouncing on his toes. Tears blurred my vision. I knelt down too, cupping Jackson's face with both hands. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. Leo threw his arms around both of us, and we stayed there for a long, beautiful moment, wrapped in each other, wrapped in hope. We had a small, beautiful wedding 3 months later, just close friends, Leo, and a few kind souls who had stood by us when the world seemed to turn away. There were no glittering chandeliers, no gold-trimmed tables. But there was love. There was laughter. There was healing. With Jackson's encouragement and unwavering support, I finally took the leap I had always dreamed of. I opened my own small accounting business, Victoria Johnson Financial Services. It wasn't easy at first. Nothing truly worthwhile ever is. But within a year, my firm had a solid reputation, known for honesty, reliability, and heart. Clients didn't just hire me for numbers. They trusted me because they could see the strength it had taken to rebuild my life. Leo flourished too. He made new friends, excelled in school, and became the bright, confident young boy I had always known he could be. Every night, as we sat together, me, Jackson, and Leo, watching the sunset from our modest backyard, I felt something powerful settle in my chest. Peace. Family. Home. We weren't the family Madison had tried to destroy. We were the family we had built with our own hands, with love, loyalty, and unbreakable bonds. And for the first time ever, I realized this is what true happiness feels like. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more powerful stories like this, please make sure to like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring content. Your support truly means the world. Stay tuned for more stories coming very soon.